I would first just like to welcome everyone. Thank you for coming to our first professional event, the HonEURs Association first professional event of this school year. I think most people in this room are familiar with the HonEURs Association, but I will still explain what we do. We're basically the association that represents all honors students of the Erasmus University, and that means all honors students of all faculties, which also means that we have a very broad range of interests amongst our members that we try to keep in mind when we make our events, and we want to keep it as broad as possible because we want to tap into those subjects that you might not get in your own studies or in your own life, whether it's personal or professional. And one of those subjects we are actually tackling today, which is leadership. For some people, a very natural subject. For some people, they know exactly what it means. For some people, it's still very abstract. And we are trying to make it a little less abstract today. And we are actually getting the help of three leaders, a few people in leadership positions. And they are not only people in leadership positions, but they're actually also Erasmus. They were Erasmus students. They were actually also Erasmus students, so that's something that they have in common with us. And today they are going to tell us what they've done in their studies, what they've done in their life afterwards, to just kind of contextualize what it is that we are doing now and where it is that we can go. Because sometimes that is also a little hard to understand. You're studying and you're like, okay, I'm doing this, but what comes after this? And today this event is to show what comes after this, I guess. So,
could come after this.
What could come after this, exactly. So we have three speakers. We have Marguerite, we have Nadeem, and we have Jaap. Jaap is coming a bit later. I'd love to spend an hour on all of them because they're very interesting, but I think they can tell you themselves in the best way who they are. So we're starting with Marguerite. So give her a hand.
Yeah, thank you. So it's almost when you get here, you feel like where to start. So I'll start where it really started, which was for me on the 21st of August in 1966. I was born in Eindhoven, which some of you might know as a city which is currently very well known for the Dutch Design Week and for Philips and ASML and all the semiconductors and the high-tech campus. I grew up there. I'm the eldest of four. I have a sister who also went to Erasmus. I'll talk about her a little bit later. And I have two younger brothers. I was the eldest, and I think that's always very interesting to know whether you're the eldest, the middle, the youngest of a family, because it somehow determines how you are. Because as the eldest, you always have to encounter everything which is coming for the first time. So I was the first to leave house. I was the first to drive a bike. I was the first not to pass for my driver's license. Of course, my sister came after me, passed it once, things like that. So. The interesting part is that it really teaches you at a very young end that the sky is the limit. So, you always have to try and explore, and the exploration was something I really, truly did, and I also still very much do. I'm still very, very curious. So I grew up, went to a school which was, before I went to that school, it was a school which was only consisting of male students and paters, so it's in paters are priests. So it was a Catholic school. And when I came a few years before, just 2 or 3 years before girls were admitted, so it was still very fresh. And it was quite interesting to be in an environment where there were still some priests, while the school was, on the other end, completely, I would almost call it neutral from everything. They were very outspoken, they were very, very open mindset. If you had religion, also other religions were being taught, so it was not only Catholic or whatever, that was a very open-minded school in that respect, which I thought was really. Already then I thought, hey, that's nice. They're also teaching us other topics and the only Christian topic, Christian religion. And now it gets really interesting because I had a sister, I already told you, and she was 1 year behind me. And so when we had to start choosing where we're going to study, she said to me like, hey Marguerite, you're in your last year, so I want to take a look at Nijrode. Why don't you subscribe for the open day at Nijrode and then take a look. And I went to Nijrode, and the campus, I've been to schools abroad during summers to learn languages. I really loved the school Nijrode and the University of Nijrode, so I actually applied for Nijrode, and I believe it or not, I was taken in. And why is it so extremely extraordinary that I was taken in? It was the first year they had a new test, so everybody now laughs at Nijrode. My family always laughs at Marguerite. Was the first time they did the test and it already failed for the first time. Because we had first psychology test, and I entered, and I didn't have I didn't have math or economics in my in high school. So I had that until the 4th grade, and the 4th class we call the Netherlands. And then the last graduation class, I did have only languages and history and Latin and Greek, so the total alpha packet, what we call in Dutch. But no math, no science, no physics, etc., you name it. And I was actually taken in. Other students of my school were not taken in, while they did have all the perfect things, economics, math, etc. And I think it was because, first and foremost, I went into that psychology study again. What can you learn from these kind of things? I went to that psychological test, and the first test was math, and after 6 minutes you have to do as many of them. Have any of you ever done such a test? Psychological test? So the first part often is always to do as many math sums as you can by heart. And everybody is surrounding me, said, I'm finished. And I was just saying, okay, this is nice, I don't think this will be it. But what I did, I started talking to people. So the whole day I was doing all those other tests, and I thought I wouldn't pass, but I was just making the best out of it. And a very enjoyable day, and so I met a lot of people, which I came across later on as well. And then when I got the results of the test, and there were about 1,000 applications, and there were 284 people who went to the second stage of the testing, and I was number 284. And so then I went to a day in Nijrode. We're going to talk about why I ended up in Rotterdam later. And then I had to talk with a student, with a professor, and with a manager from a company. And I've always liked to talk to people. So because I spent that day, first day, talking to a lot of people, I had really some good impressions of what I thought, okay, this is how they look at things, this is how I look at things, so I could match that. And then I was indeed taken in. I had a fantastic year at Nijrode, but of course, back to math, which at the moment is one of those topics which everybody talks about, math and STEM for girls especially. Yeah? But, this is not my thing. So after 1 year, full year of Nijrode, I had a fantastic year, learned a lot about business, learned a lot about a lot of things, macroeconomics, you name it, etc., marketing. And after the year, I had my, how do you call it, re-examinations, and I had to do 3 trimesters of math re-examinations, and I scored 3 times. It's not even to mention what I scored, I don't think I scored anything. So I was allowed to stay. But I looked at myself and thought, hey, I've had a fantastic year, I've done everything, I've seen it all. And then at the time you had to redo a full year. So now back to my sister. She had in the meantime subscribed to study economics in Rotterdam. So I was faced with a situation like you have to do a year all over again. Or I could do it and start something over new. And I thought, I've had a fantastic year, I've really done my best, but this math situation will repeat itself next year again, because I don't think this is really me. So I actually went to my sister in Rotterdam while she was having the Reka week. I think you still have the Reka week when you don't have COVID-19. So she was partying like crazy. And I looked at her and I said, okay, I'm going to do law. And I would have chosen law before I've ever been on Nijrode, but I would have chosen Leiden. But when I did my Nijrode thing, I was so intrigued by all the business elements and economic elements and all the marketing elements. I said, okay, I want to go and study rechten in Rotterdam. So I opted for law in Rotterdam, started doing law in Rotterdam, and it was just something I really liked. So back to what's important, to do the things you really like and interested in. So I finished law in Rotterdam in only 3.5 years. And I can tell you, everybody, it's a pity Jaap is not here now, because Jaap and I know each other from those days on. But everybody who learned that I graduated, thought I actually skipped studying again. But I only partied, but I did the things I really liked. And also back, what's interesting there, if you take a look at all the minors you can do, all the topics you can study, try to do those things which really are of interest, which might be a passion, which you're interested in, where you're curious in. Read a paper, take a look what's going on. If it has your attention, then the studying is really easy because you're actually curious and want to learn about it. Now, so I started doing it. Law was very quickly finished. After 3.5 years, I did a ski camp, and I was heading up a ski camp, so I was very active in all kinds of things with children. And one of the children had an accident. And while I was still totally engaged in student life, I was doing at camp with 3 other students, so we had kids 12 to 15 years. And I noticed that, I really wanted to have more responsibility, and I liked responsibility. So I thought I can continue studying and do a master here, a master there, but I really was done. I had my master in law, and I decided to go and work. And I started working for a company where I'd done a summer job. So if you do any jobs at the moment, and you call it internships or stages, be aware that that might be really your future firm where you will start working. Take it seriously if you want to take it seriously. And I did not take this job when I was doing an internship there the year before. I didn't take it very seriously, but still they thought I was a good person to hire, which I think is extra nice. So I started working in insurance and actually reinsurance. And the interesting part of that is that it's back to math. Some of you might say, but hey, insurance, isn't that quite actuarial? Isn't that really also something where you have to do a lot of calculations and math? Yes, you do. So the interesting part is that somehow the things where you're not good at, be aware that that might be something which triggers you later on. Because it's something where, so try to mirror those things. If there's something you're really not good at now, let it be. But be aware that somehow it might overhaul you in the future. And that's what I thought was really interesting for me, that I ended up in a business which is really data analytical driven as insurance, and with actuarial calculations about how to understand risk, how to mitigate risk, etc. In the meantime, I had, tell me how long I still have. In the meantime, I had actually met my husband. At the time, my partner. He studied first mining in Delft, and then he became a pilot. He didn't like, was a navigator on a helicopter in his military service time. Studied for 1 year mining, and then he actually decided not to pursue his mining studies, but he went to become a military pilot, and afterwards he now works for KLM. And why do I specifically mention him? Because there are some things in life which is important. It's important to choose your study. It's important to make sure that you succeed in your study. It's important to choose your employer, that you do that. But it's also very important to take a look who your partner is. That partner is instrumental for your own happiness and facilitate you also in your home environment with your happiness. And that's important. It's important to have stability. And it's important to be aware that that's really a crucial factor. So I married him, and he very much stimulated me to do and pursue the dreams I wanted to pursue, which I think is also important. That you take a look, what do you want to do? How do you want to act? Success is not something you can determine yourself. It's actually relying on a lot of different factors. And one of them is that you're interested in something, that you're passionate about something, but also that some other people in your environment empower you to be who you want to be successful. Now he very much did so. And so I've always, also when I got my children, he allowed me, or I choose, whatever you want to call it, I think I choose definitely, to continue working. And that's not a given in the Netherlands either, because many women in the Netherlands opted for part-time work or opted for quitting work at all at the time when I pursued my career. And all my friends, including Jaap and others, they all thought, she's not going to pursue her, she's not going to sit at home with the children. And they thought I would, because it was the social surroundings that people thought, okay, if she has children, she will sit at home. And I opted for my own choice. I didn't want to sit at home. I wanted to have my children, and I wanted to have work and to pursue a career. So follow also your own perseverance on these kind of things. If you feel like you really want to do something, you have a certain dream, then definitely try it. Even if you don't make it, and at least you've tried. I think it's better to try and to fail than not to have tried at all, because then it's a failure without even trying. And I don't think any try is a failure, by the way. That's also important. So I started working, and why do I take so much time of those little steps, which for some of you might have already been just recently passed? But it's very important that you realize that there are always things in your past which determine the future of your future success. So if you have not, if you still have some things which you need to settle down with, or you need to settle for yourself, then you need to do it now at your age. That you have that, that grounding of where you are, what you want to be. So my career, I started working in a reinsurance brokerage, which is insurance of insurance companies. All went very well, was acquired, went to London for 2 years. Always people, change and international have been the 3 cornerstones of everything I do in my life. Went to London 2 years, had a wonderful time, but determined that I loved London and I loved Lloyd's and I loved everything that was there, but that's not the place I want to grow, I want to live. Because it's fantastic when you're young and single and have everything around you, but to have a family there wasn't the thing I wanted to do. In 1997, the company I was heading was acquired by Aon. Aon is a huge global insurance firm. We have 50,000 people in 120 countries. And I started with a small family-owned company, and that whole acquisition of Aon, of my company, allowed me actually to take the world. Because I started in a small family-owned company in the Netherlands, and Aon, when they acquired me, suddenly gave me the whole world. So it scaled my complete global world, and it was already global, but it really scaled it up to another magnitude. And all of the steps I've taken from that day on have been career steps which have helped me. I always wanted to learn. I think the learning capability is something I think is the most important. You study, you're here at university, but I hope that you understand that your life is one big learning curve. If you allow to keep on learning, you will learn everything, something new, and that will allow you to go develop yourself further. And so I still do. I've been to INSEAD, so I never stop learning. I've done all kinds of different exams, even after I graduated from university. I've been to Harvard Business School in 2016. I was this weekend in New York, and again I was with some friends of Harvard in New York. So I surround myself by people who stimulate me, the people who help me to be curious, but also people who tell me what to do or not to do. So I'm not surrounding me with people who always say, yes, Marguerite, no, Marguerite, if I want to hear yes or no, no, I surround myself by people who challenge me. Because that helps me to challenge myself. So that was the career thing.
That was the career thing. Now moving on to the leadership style, because you did have also a growing curve in your insurance.
Yeah. So I always say that you can't call yourself a leader. Whether you're a leader or not is being determined by the people who are surrounding you. So if I give lectures, and I do give lectures, and I did one recently at PricewaterhouseCoopers. And then I said, who of the group was 200 people, and all partners, who of you thinks that he's a leader? So some of them was doing this. So I said, okay, let me first, before you go on, I said, this is a trick question, of course, and what I said, a leader is something you can't call it by yourself. You're a leader because other people want to follow you. And so it's important to be original, to stimulate, to inspire, to motivate, so that other people are looking at you and say, hey, he or she, what you have is what I would like to follow. So my style has always been a mix of what we call masculine and feminine values. I think it's very much a mix, so it's not only the feminine values of empathy. I can be really tough too, and I can also be in command and control, which is being determined as a masculine value from time to time. But I have a mix of both. And I think my leadership style is also to be relevant, not only for myself, but actually more for others. I think that's also very important, not to take a look at how does it relate to yourself, but more how does it relate to others. So I try to look from certain things, not only from inside out, which you automatically do, because it's me who is doing, but I also always try to take it in from outside in. And that's something I've learned to do also, because what I've learned is that I've learned to stand in a certain situation, I've learned to stand in the middle of the room and to put my radar on. So not only to take a look at there, what I'm seeing now, but okay, what's going on behind me? And where's my blind spot? Do I have a blind spot to the situation? Of course, everybody has blind spots. And what's my blind spot? And what's going on? And I've not only learned how to use my heart and my brain, but I also very much, and I think this is, I use also my senses, and I take a look what's going on, so I can actually, when I start a meeting, and I didn't use it in the past, but when I enter a room, I can sense whether the atmosphere is right or wrong. So maybe it's because I'm very curious after people, and so one tip which my husband actually taught me was every time when he starts a flight in the plane, he has a new co-pilot sitting next to him. And then how do you deal with your new co-pilot? So every time when he starts his flight, before they actually do all the checklists, he asks his co-pilot, how are you doing? What happened to you today? Have you had a nice day? Everything okay at home? And what that actually allows you to do is to be grounded in the situation you're in. So you can tell, yeah, I had a good day or not a good day. And then you've had a voice, the other person has had a voice, and he has been heard. And it's also important to make sure that you understand people want to be heard, but people also want to be led. But if you want to lead people, and it's back to leadership style, you need to be very much aware of what the other people's person, what's going on with them. Not so much with you, but what's going on with the other side.
Yeah. Thank you. By the way, I would just like to say, if anyone had any questions during the talk, keep them in mind after all of the speakers have said their words. We have room for questions. So, yes, next.
So my role model. So this was really funny because I gave two names, but then we decided to opt for one because you would all know this lady here, which you might have grown up with because when you were watching Harry Potter. I definitely read all the books. I did read the books before I ever saw the movies. Why Emma Watson? I think Emma Watson is for me a living example of a person who did something which made her very successful. But for her, that wasn't it. So she thought, okay, she became very successful with playing Hermione, but she decided to start doing something which she believed in. She went to Oxford. She graduated herself from Oxford. And she started really looking at, okay, what do I want to do? What do I feel? What do I passionate about? She's passionate about the United Nations. She's passionate about topics which really touch our agendas daily at the moment in the whole world. And she raised her voice in that manner, which is quite extraordinary because she's a very good-looking lady. She's a supermodel. She's a super actress. But you can see that she doesn't look, and this is my message why I think Emma Watson is special. It's not only the looks, it's not only the outside, but it's definitely the inside, the content. And why do I tell you this? I think that's why I want to give you her along. So please, you're in a generation where a lot of things are determined by looks, by social media, only happy-go-lucky messages. Take a look at what's behind there. What's really keeping a person awake at night? Why is he bothered? Why is he happy? Why is he not? And take a look at the content, what's truly going on. And so don't let yourself be puzzled. You can be puzzled, but don't let yourself be taken away by the looks, but really try to find out what's behind that look. Because that's the journey of what I call the exploration of your own leadership style. That you learn how to develop yourself, not only by the things you study now, but also by being interested, curious, and look for the things which are not so obvious. And especially at your age, I think that's important that you look for the things which are not so obvious. And talk about it as well. That's why we're here today as well.
Yes, thank you. And you also actually mentioned before we started that you had another example that you left out.
Yeah, so the other one was Hillary Clinton. And I'm very fortunate. I've met very, very many nice people, and I met Hillary Clinton also personally. Why did I meet her? I was in Chicago, and one of my colleagues said, hey Manu, this was years ago, this was when she was running for president against Obama, so it's really not 12 years ago, I think now. And so she said, do you want to go and meet Hillary? I said, yes. And because Hillary was next to Bill, why did I like her? She was extremely taking a look at, the angle of feminines and careers of feminines in society. With the whole Monica Lewinsky situation, she showed great perseverance by still standing up, which wasn't, in that view, wasn't really easy. That's Jaap. Come and sit, Jaap. And so I'm talking about my two role models. So one was Emma Watson, but you just missed that story.
I'm so sorry I missed it.
Yeah, that's okay. And the second one I didn't really, was Hillary Clinton, and I'm trying to say why, because what I liked about her was her can-do mentality and also her bounce-back mentality. So if things go wrong, or things are not going the way you want them, you can say, okay, I quit, or you can stand up and face them and and do like this. I always call it like this: if something doesn't go the way I want it, I do it like this, then I go on again. So I use the power of what we can call like bounce back to take it back further again. And Hillary Clinton for me was in that respect a real role model as regards how she handled very delicate situations. And afterwards, of course, she was running for president, which she didn't make against Trump, but I'm not sure whose biggest was that's been maybe all of our worlds. Yeah.
And I think also Hillary Clinton relates to what you said about leadership styles, about the masculine and feminine balance. She also.
Yeah, although I think it's changing in the United States as we speak, but in the past, when I was getting in my career, you can make the photo. When I was in the beginning of my career in the United States, all the women were always dressed in the power suits, as I call them. And I was always, as I'm today again, I was always wearing colors. And that's changed now, so people feel that they can be truly themselves. So if you want to dress in pink, like I'm doing, you dress in pink. If you want to dress in a jeans, you dress in a jeans. I think that what Hillary Clinton, I think personally, I really think she lost the election at the time because she was too much trying to make up and trying to dress and behave how people thought she should be behaving as the first female who ever run for president. Yeah. So I think that lesson of that is to be your authentic self. Because if you're yourself, nobody can take that away from you. And,
thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes. If you have any questions for Marguerite, there's room at the end. Okay. Next.
You've just so this is Jaap. Jaap and I have studied together when we were younger. We've not seen each other for some years.
Maybe for many years. Yeah.
It's a
I'm so
reunion.
sorry I
Also.
missed your story. Yeah.
I just said at the time when we studied, it wasn't understand. And then we passed on to Nadeem. But the funny part was that when we studied, I just said, because otherwise Jaap doesn't know what I said, is that the expectation was for, I married Christian, who Jaap happens to know as well, and the expectation was at the time that girls, once they had babies, they would stop working. That was really the social, and I wasn't very, ik was niet erg gehoorzaam. So some people said my husband didn't control me. I can tell Jaap because Jaap knows my Christian, so that's why it's so funny. But the interesting part is that you have to go your own road. I think everybody here in this room is for whatever you want to do. It's important to choose your own roads to do, wherever you want to go. Nadeem.
Nadeem, yes. Give him a hand. The floor is yours.
Thank you. That was really interesting. Thanks for that. Interesting because there are a couple of things that I recognize from how I approach life as well. So to give some context, starting, I was born to a Dutch-Egyptian family. My dad worked in oil and gas, so we traveled around the world, moving every 3 years. So I was both cross-culture as well as cross-ethnicity. And that created a mixture that wherever I went, I never fit in. So how do you deal with that? And that's been, throughout my life, a real constant of the move and the change, which you were also talking about, but also trying to adapt to the new places where you go and understanding the people around you. And I think that the authenticity is something that I had to learn later on, accepting who I was as an outsider, and that's okay, right? And certainly in this international environment, I think you feel less of an outsider than when you try and integrate into the culture of a country in which you're living that isn't your own culture. So we traveled around, and then I came back to the Netherlands towards the end of my high school, and I was doing the International Baccalaureate. I'm not sure if anyone knows that. Okay. And then from there, I moved on, and I was an introvert. I really didn't like people and felt insecure. I was short and fat, and I got bullied and beaten up, and so I didn't know what to do. One thing I did know is I loved Star Wars and Star Trek. And I found out that in Amsterdam, they were teaching artificial intelligence. I mean, what could be better than that, going and building robots? So I went and I studied artificial intelligence in Amsterdam. And it was only when I was studying that I realized I wasn't actually building them, I was programming them. And the programming wasn't my joy in life. What I did learn there, and I think that's something you need to take with you, is even if what you're studying is not where your passion is, there's a lot that you can learn from it. So I learned how to break down really complex problems into things that you can actually deal with and move forward with that. And I had always been really interested in war movies and whatever. I picked up martial arts along the way. And towards the end of my study, I was doing projects for the Ministry of Defense because there was a war going on in Afghanistan. And so when I was coming to graduate, the military came to me and they said, hey, how about coming and joining us? And for some reason, even though I traveled the world, God, Queen and Country was very high in my list of priorities. Now God, King and Country, a little bit less high in my list of priorities. So I said yes, and I joined the Dutch military, and I spent 2.5 years jumping out of airplanes, which was a lot of fun, and if you get a chance, please do it. You don't have to do it in the dead of night or whatever, but I mean, if you want to understand fear, that's the moment that you're terrified. And then after 2.5 years, I left the Dutch military, and I went to work for Oracle. And Oracle is a great company, it just didn't fit me. The problem is that Oracle, like a lot of companies, is only looking out for Oracle and the stakeholders, right? And I had come from the military, I had this strong urge to add value to society, and that's something we were talking about earlier on. And I wasn't adding value to anyone except the shareholders and my bosses. So after a while there, I was thinking, okay, what else can I do? And I started looking around for a different job. And everywhere that I looked, they looked at my CV and they said, you did artificial intelligence, how about becoming a programmer? And I'm like, that's not what I want to be doing, right? And so I was thinking, what am I going to do? And my dad had always pushed me to keep learning, and he's very right in that. So I looked around for an executive MBA program, and that's how I came to the Erasmus. Because my standards were very clear. I wanted something that was international, because that's what I loved and knew. I wanted something in English, because that was my native language. And I wanted something I could do beside my work that was internationally recognized. And then you come to the Erasmus. And that's why Nairobi actually dropped from my list. So I did the Executive 1 MBA here. For those of you who don't know it, it's a joint MBA with a number of schools around the world, which is great because you get a diploma from 5 different universities. It was in Mexico there was one, Monterrey Tech. There was FGV in Brazil. There was Chapel Hill, North Carolina in the US, and the Chinese University of Hong Kong and the Erasmus. And you got to travel around and meet people from new cultures. And that's where it really became clear to me that the key to success and understanding each other, and I think society as a whole has kind of lost this, is finding the common things that we have with the people opposite us. And once we recognize what we have with the person sitting opposite us, it makes it a lot easier to appreciate the differences. If we only focus on the differences, then those become scary, and aggression and tension starts to build up. So for you, I recognize a couple of international people here, that's why we're doing it in English. Think about that. When you're in a country or a culture and you're not fully understood or fully understanding, what is it that you have in common, and build up from there. So I did my executive MBA, and in the meantime, I ended up at a small company called Fox IT. I'm not sure if anyone knows it, but Fox IT does protection of state secrets, IT security. And I was responsible for the Middle East, which is really badly protected from a cybersecurity point of view, let me tell you, and Eastern Europe. And it was a great time, except it was relatively static. I needed the dynamic environment that I'd had growing up and that I had during my MBA. So when Accenture came to me and said, hey, do you want to come and help support and build our cybersecurity consulting, I jumped at the chance, and I spent 8 years having an amazing time there. And I strongly advise anyone who's not sure what they want to do, take a look at consulting. Certainly at the beginning of your career, it's just amazing. You can tell I still like it. The problem is there's a return on investment. The amount of effort and energy that you put in your work, there has to be something that's coming back. And after 8 years, I got a call from one of my old MBA classmates, who was at that point in time the group CIO at Nationale Nederlander, which is an insurance company here in the Netherlands. And he said, we're kind of struggling with embedding security. Can you come and help us out? So I shifted and I went there, and Nationale Nederlander is jokingly, and it's a joke because it's mostly true, referred to as the Ministry of Insurance. The culture there did not fit me at all. People came to work at 9:30, 10 o'clock and left at around 3. That may sound ideal, but it is killing for anyone who's ambitious and who wants to keep moving. I just spent 3 years there, and honestly, they were the worst 3 years that I've ever experienced. Not because it's a bad company, but because it wasn't a fit for me. I took away from it a lot of positive things. I took away from it the role of HR, in my opinion, with regards to how people operate. I took away how you're meant to interact with DevOps teams, which is a large part of my leadership style, and I agree with you that we can't call ourselves leaders. It's the people who we manage that will determine whether you're a leader or not. And if you want to piss off your LT, ask them what justifies them being called an LT, and they don't like those kind of questions because then they have to take a hard look at themselves. But all of those things I took away from working at a client side at C-level within NN, as well as within Accenture, gave me the opportunity when Microsoft decided finally that security is now going to be a separate division. It wasn't until the beginning of this fiscal in the 1st of July. They wanted to build it up. And I applied and I got the role for Chief Security Officer in Western Europe for Microsoft. So that means all of Western Europe, the 12 countries we have, and all of the clients that we have within those 12 countries, from a security perspective, fall under my control. That is not doable, I can tell you. So once again, the key is get people in the countries and the client side that you can empower to be successful. Can we go on to the next one? Yeah, thank you. Because what I learned is I work for the people that report to me. It is my role to make them successful. It's that simple. So when I was at NN, and I'll take NN as an example because it's a lot smaller and easier to understand than at Microsoft, I had DevOps teams that were reporting to me, and in order to be successful, they had to actually complete things. But when I was talking to them individually, because you need to recognize people and make them feel heard, when you're talking to them and you find out that their passion, their ambition, and primarily their drive as far as career perspective isn't in line with what is necessary to make that team successful, you're never going to push them to do what they need to do. Because sometimes you need to work more than the 40 hours a week for which you're being paid for. And they will resent you if you make them do that. So for those people, it's really simple. You can get rid of them, which is not the right way of doing it, or you can try and find a place for them within the organization or outside of the organization using your own network where they do fit and where they are going to be successful. And that's how you create advocates around the world. And the rest of the team, I was really simple with them. Somebody once described that I'm about as subtle as a bull in a china shop, which I initially had to think about what that means, but I think it means I don't play political games. But it also means people know what they have with me. And I was very simple. I told them, if you have goals and there are blockers that you don't tell me about, I will hold you responsible if you do not meet your objectives. If you have goals and there are blockers that you do tell me about, and I am unable to take them out of the way, then I will not hold you responsible. It is my responsibility. And when you start treating people that way and talking about what they've done rather than who they are as a person, you can be extremely critical and have very harsh discussions around the behavior of a person without actually attacking the person in their own self-worth. And I feel that it's also important that you have a dialogue where people feel they can come up to you and say, I don't appreciate what you did here, even those people reporting to me. And that's something I learned along the way. I've had, my first manager at Oracle, I was a victim of sexual harassment there. And when I went to HR, they said, well, we can't do shit about that. Can I say that? Okay. Because he's a friend of the country manager. The fact of the matter is, you need to teach your managers how you should be managed in order to be successful. And your managers need to teach you what their leadership or management style is so that you can find common ground, so that there isn't a misunderstanding. I've had, when I was in consulting, clients that would send emails all in caps, and it felt like they were shouting at me the whole time. So at one point I said, this is what it feels like. Is that your intention as well? And they said, no, that's not my intention at all. It's that this is important and I want you to not miss it. I was like, okay. Then at least I know where you're coming from. And those questions and the communication that you have is vital at every stage in your career. Just because you're starting your career doesn't mean that you don't have questions and that you shouldn't be teaching other people as well. So I agree, you need to find an organization where you're passionate about it. For me, I need to be working for an organization, and the role I have is one that I am proud to be working for and working in. But I also feel that when you're going, and certainly given the current job market, realize an interview goes both ways. It's a dialogue. And that's going to be the rest of the time. Don't go into an interview unprepared. Go in there knowing what you want out of the role, what questions you have, and start that dialogue, and then set the agenda moving forward together. I think that's a key thing that I didn't know when I was just starting, and I've only started to realize, but given the job market, you guys are golden.
So you mean also know your own worth during the interview?
Definitely, yes. And talk to people around you. I know people who refuse to accept any help, and by help I mean, coaching or having a discussion, what kind of role is this, how should I approach the interview or whatever, because they feel talking to others and learning from other people's experiences negates their own value. They're like, oh, would I have gotten the job if I hadn't done that? I can tell you, I regularly go to my friends and coworkers and I ask them for advice. How should you approach this? What would you do? Am I doing the right thing? Because that feedback and the mirroring is what makes it successful. There's this really crappy Dutch expression that says, "De maatschappij, dat zijn wij." We are society, and I hate these things, but it is true. And if COVID has taught us anything, it's that in order to be successful, we need to do it alone. The old paradigm of, in order for me to win, you all have to lose, doesn't go anymore, right? It's a win-win situation if we're moving forward. I think that's my leadership style. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, hands up. Does anyone recognize these two? Any one of them? No, I would have been really surprised. Okay, so Elizabeth van Geerestein is actually a teacher at the RSM. She teaches personal leadership and career development. The reason that she's there is, I'm assuming you've all heard the expression, don't judge someone until you've walked a mile in their shoes. Yeah? Does anyone really understand that expression? Because I didn't. It took me ages to do. But she turned it around and she said, we judge others by their impact, but we want others to judge us by our intentions. And how often have you been in a fight or a discussion and said, but that wasn't my intention? And that was a golden nugget for me, because every time that somebody says something that comes across negative or that I feel uncomfortable, I'm extremely emotional, right? Half Arab, what are you going to get? So I try and think about that. Okay, so what is this person trying to do? What is their intention? And just show the empathy that comes out of it. And the conversations you have out of that makes it a lot easier to move forward from conflict. A friend of mine, he was Heinz Ruttermond, he was the head of Shell during the Brent Spa incident, which if anyone remembers that, I'm sure you guys do, kudos. Brent Spa was an oil rig that Shell wanted to sink in the North Sea. And Greenpeace did a huge campaign where they prevented the sinking of that. He was the head of Shell in the UK at that point in time, and it destroyed his career because he stuck to the message, the Brent Spa is clean, we can sink it. And eventually they were convinced to draw it into Norway, and they cut it up into pieces, and they made something out of it, and they proved it was clean. But you have to move past the first chapter, is what he told me. You're never going to win from Greenpeace. So as long as you stay in that conflict mode, you're not going to win. So you need to move forward to a mode in which you give and recognize somebody, and you move into how are you going to move forward from that. And that's the same thing, right? What are the intentions of the other person? The other person, Onno van der Wind, great photo of him, is a retired general in the Dutch military. This is him in operations in Georgia, on the border between Georgia and Russia, keeping the two countries apart. The wonderful thing about the military is those people who go in to become officers spend 4 years out of high school into the military academy and come out as a second lieutenant. And they are 23, 24, something like that. And what they have to learn very quickly is that even though they're in charge, they're not the ones with all the knowledge. Because you've got people that have 15, 20 years experience that are reporting to you, just have never gone into the officers academy. What he taught me was the recognition between taking ownership, responsibility of the choices, but using the experience of those people who know what they're talking about in order to get the experience, the knowledge that you need in order to make those decisions. And I think too many of us get into a position of a management position or a decision-making position and think, now it's my responsibility, I'm going to do it, and everyone's going to listen to me. And the smart ones leave that behind after a year or two, but you do see people at all levels in your organization that still think that way. don't. There's always somebody smarter. The best thing to do is find that person and get them on your team. If you are the smartest person in the room, you are in the wrong room. Is there another slide or am I done? This is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
But, I mean, there might be questions.
Yeah, okay. If you have questions later, please feel free.
Thank you. And also,
Yeah.
Yeah, our third speaker.
Thank you for those. Thank you for the many wise nuggets you had in there. I really enjoyed them. And, a bit awkward going after you because I don't think I've got any of those. And I'm really sorry I missed your story as well. So much. It's good to see you again. My leadership story, geez. Well, I've been a student and a faller overer, I guess, of leadership all my life. And I'm now doing what Nadeem said, you know, your teams hate, which is asking teams, what's your purpose? And so that's what I do for a living. And I try to link it to, you know, the individual question, what is actually your individual purpose? And when those two, you know, slightly resemble one another, you're probably in a good spot. And when they don't, you're probably not in a very good spot. But similar to yourself, you know, I traveled a lot when I was young. I'm the son of a diplomat, so we moved 3 or 4 times every time as well. And it's interesting that you say, and I wonder, you know, where do I belong? I felt I belonged everywhere. So, you know, I'm Dutch, definitely, but my kids are Australian. I have a European passport, I think. You know, I lived in the States for a long time. I probably had my best time living in Pakistan. We lived in Thailand, and so I actually feel at home everywhere in the world, and also don't feel at home anywhere really. So I guess that's something that's there too. And when I was in my youth, I was the captain of the team very often. I trained younger teams, so I just really enjoyed this notion of how can I help others and take some leading positions from a very young age. I was very active in my student days here in Rotterdam. It took me way too long to study, but thoroughly enjoyed every minute of it. Probably have my best memories there. I made my best friends in those years, definitely. I also learned a lot about leadership. I probably learned my biggest lesson about how not to lead when I went into the army, which was still compulsory in the Netherlands at the time. And I distinctly remember I had 5 months of training, and that was a very good time because I was unfit when I came in and I'm much fitter when I did come out. I've still got a few terrible habits, like really cleaning up my cupboard and you know, in very organized manner that my wife looks at me and says, what on earth is wrong with you? You know, I've got a few weird things like that still with me, but I felt very sorry for myself. I was one of the last ones that had to go in. And there were 34 boys in my platoon that also you know, were one of the last ones that had to come in. And I felt very sorry for myself, and I felt sorry for those guys. And so I thought I was a terrific leader by actually giving people a break all the time. And so, you know, if we had to go for a 10-kilometer march, I sort of take them, you know, 5 kilometers, and we'd hide in the bushes somewhere, and then we'd come out and, you know, take shortcuts. If we had to, you know, make our vehicles dirty, then we would just throw a few spots of mud at it, and then we'd clean it quickly so we could go back into the bar, which I also led the troops many, many times. And what I noticed is that a lot of kids from other platoons came to me and said, can I come into your platoon because it looks pretty cool. And so I you know, was pretty happy with myself, and I thought, so this is how leadership works. And one of my roomies, he also had a platoon, and he took a totally different approach. He said, well, I'm not happy that I'm here either, but I'm here, right? And so my team is probably not very happy that they're here, but they're here. And so if we got to march 10 kilometers, we're going to go 15. You know, we're going to be proud that we did 15. If we have to take our vehicles into the mud, we're not just driving them through the mud once, we're driving them 10 times, and we're going to throw it in, and we're going to really make them as dirty as possible, and then we'll clean them again. And you know, if we have to go to the bar, we'll be disciplined about it, and we'll just take it easy, and then we'll make sure that we're all fresh the next day. And so many of the kids in the town kids came to me and said, can I come into your platoon? And like I said, I felt pretty good about myself. Until the very last day. You know, so we showed up on the last day, and the major stood in front of the troops and said, well, everyone, you know, for the last time, at ease, and off you go, and see you later. And my platoon just went boom, straight. Everybody just left as soon as they could, right? Never saw them again. Everybody's like, thank God this is over. You know, I can get on with my real life. And they just disappeared. And much to my surprise, you know, his platoon stayed behind. And they went for lunch afterwards. They were hugging each other and crying and saying, you know, how good a time they'd had. every year afterwards they came together as a platoon and stuck together, and my platoon never came back together again at all. And so I thought, who have I done a favor now by being cynical and being slack like this? Who feeling sorry for myself and feeling sorry for the others? Certainly not myself, because I haven't had a good time. Not my boys, because they think about this time as a waste of time in their life, but we didn't learn as much as they could have. And also not the army, right? What have we done for the army that was actually good for our country? So I really learned a big lesson to never be cynical again. So now if I find myself becoming cynical, I try to stop myself or move to a different direction. So that was my biggest leadership lesson probably, and I fell over many more times, I can tell you that. I finished my studies and did a few internships, showed up for Shell in Australia, and met a beautiful young woman there, and she tells a story that she was asked to look after me and did it a little bit too well. I disagree, but anyway, 27 years later, we're still married. We have three beautiful children, and we had a lovely time in doing those traineeships. And then we got together, and I applied for a few jobs, and the company that would send me abroad most quickly was ABN AMRO, and so I joined them because they would send me abroad, and I had this urge to go abroad. So I did that and started in Pakistan, and then went to, like I said, to many different other places, and was very lucky to do all sorts of things. And after a while, we had 2 young children, and this moving 9 times in 10 years became a bit old, and so we decided to move back to Australia. And there I became, I've been an investment banker all my life, and I was pretty happy with myself that I, worked in the US, and I've been in all these places, and dealing room in Chicago was pretty cool, earned some nice bonuses, and so I came to Australia thinking, everybody will be waiting for me. For the first 4 months, couldn't get an interview. And so then I decided to move into a different direction and applied with one of the local banks because I wanted to get out of banking and I just couldn't get any interviews. And they gave me a job in the medium and mid-sized markets. And so all of a sudden, 35, now I have 13 offices and sort of 300 people in my team. I'm thinking, oh my goodness, I better probably just tell people how you do banking, right? Because I'm an expert at this. So that took me about 2 meetings, I think. And then I realized that all the people that were in my team had so much more experience than I had. And so I had no idea what value I had to add, because none of them, I needed to teach, certainly not that type of banking. I had nothing to teach them. And so I had a major crisis at 35, thinking, where do I add value? And then I went to visit a 50-year-old man who was in my team, and I said, what can I do for you, and how can I help? And he said, I don't really know. And at a certain moment I said, how do you still get better? Because you do it all so well already, how do you still get better? And he said, I don't think I need to get any better. And I thought, okay, this is my opportunity. So here is maybe my role is to help people get better and see what they can get better at. So it's when I started executive coaching and did a course in that and went to the psychological side of leadership and part of the task side, really dug into what makes people tick, why do they do the things that they do, where do they want to develop. And so went down that course, and so my leadership style, if I can talk about that, became very much how do I help other people achieve what they want to achieve, and then also how do I make teams help teams achieve what they want to achieve, and then how do I help organizations achieve what they want to achieve. So that's what I did after that. I then went into HR, and then after a while, similar to yourself, Nadeem, coming from a public servant background, you were going to go into business, but that was only temporary, right? You learn a few things so you could do the real good things after that, which was to work in the public sector. And so I joined Save the Children and did that for about a year or so. And then came to the conclusion that too was a large organization where I thought they would put the plight of children first and then the survival of the company second, but that was not the way it was. And I realized that large organizations, actually, that the logic of large organizations is that the only way that we can do the work that we need to do is to make sure that we survive ourselves first. And so, sometimes the dilemmas between do we look after the kids or we look after ourselves, we still chose ourselves. And that was not something that I came to the not-for-profit sector for. And I thought, well, if that's the case, I might as well go and do commercial work again. So I went back and did leadership development in the commercial world, and then did that 3 days a week, and or 4 days a week for a while, and then 3 days later on, and did 2 days pro bono work in the not-for-profit sector. So I worked a lot in youth prisons, trying to find a way for people who are, if you end up in prison, a lot of things went wrong in your life, And there's very little that you did wrong. There's a lot that went wrong for you, at least that's my belief. And so we try to help these kids do that. And one way in which we want to do that is to help schools embrace difficult children rather than kick them out onto the street, because all the kids that end up in jail have been kicked out of school. There's not hardly anyone who finds a good community at school and then ends up in jail. So anyway, many things like that we did. And then, after 25 years of living abroad, I missed my friends in the Netherlands. My mom was getting older, my sisters were still here, and my sons were both at university, and I said to my daughter, what would it be like if you were 21 years old and you look back on your life and you've lived 21 years in Australia, or you've lived 19 years in Australia and 2 years in the Netherlands. Well, do you think you'd be richer for that? And probably a bit manipulative, but she said, yes, I think I would be richer for it. And so I said, well, you just decided to come to the Netherlands. And so the three of us, my wife, my daughter and I came here. She did international baccalaureate, and she's just recently started at University College here in Rotterdam. So I've seen her probably twice in the last 6 months, and she's on her own, doing really well. So that's sort of the leadership story, I guess. And like I said, I think leadership is a privilege. I think leadership is about helping others achieve the dreams that they want to achieve. And therefore, courage and curiosity are the two words that come to mind for me when it comes to leadership. Can you be courageous to forget about yourself and help other people step in? And can you be curious to what actually makes other people tick, which is very much a theme I think I picked up from you, Nadeem, as well. So if you ask me,
as well,
yeah, for you too as well.
Exactly the same.
Yeah.
Curiosity.
And courage, right? Those are the two. Leadership styles. I don't know. I've tried everything, right? And so, like I said, I like the theory part of it, and theory talks a lot about, they talk about horizontal development, right? So you can get better at skills, but they also talk about vertical development, which means you can deal with complexity better as you go along. And so there's sort of 4 styles in that I really like. I'll go very quickly through them. But you start as an expert. And so the way that you lead is just do as I do and you'll be successful. And let me explain it to you one more time. Right? And we're focused on tasks, and meetings are there to explain things, and then just get on with what you need to do and we'll all be successful. That works if you know better what you need to do than the person who's there, right? And otherwise it doesn't work, because you can't lead as an expert anymore. So then you get to an achiever stage, most people. So you set targets, you take out the whip and the carrot and you go, come on, we can do better than this, let's run. And you just, excite people, and meetings are there to get buy-in. You've got a vision of where you want to go, and you just drag people along, and it's exciting. And you have big celebrations at the end. And, it's a really fun and big environment to be in. If everybody's excited about the task at hand, it works really, really well. Until it doesn't anymore. Because now the group's too big, or the assignment is too complex for any one person to understand. And so then you need to get a facilitator for that style. And so your relationship with stakeholders changes from getting buy-in to actually getting input. You start thinking about meetings not as ways to convince people with a predetermined idea, but actually to generate ideas together. And as a leader, sometimes you step forward, but sometimes, your aim is to help other people be successful. And the definition of leadership is, if I get the right people in the room and help them, get to where they want to go, then we'll be successful as a team if all the notes are aligned. And that works for a while until it doesn't anymore, because then you get to a level of complexity where you really need to start solving problems like climate change or like, COVID crisis in the Netherlands. Good luck, trying to facilitate a team in that. So now you need to become sort of a coalition builder. And that sometimes means, you need to make sure that you get people into a room who together sort of have a purpose that they want to live into, and then facilitate the conversation. And your role as a leader actually disappears, right? All you do is you call people together and you try to take some initiative, but there's no leadership in the traditional world that's like, follow me, or anything like that. So I like to think about what's the situation I'm in, and therefore what leadership styles call on me for. Do I need to be the expert here? Should I be the achiever? Should I be the facilitator? Or should I at this stage move to being the coalition builder? And I fail at that regularly. I try to do my best. I find the last one very, very difficult, because it's fun to tell people what to do and to do exciting things and get somewhere. And so you're continuously fighting against yourself. But those are sort of 4 leadership styles. And then if I come to the people that I admire, I took 3 big pictures. Of course, there's Martin Luther King, and he had a vision for life, and it's just very difficult not to think of someone who has a dream and takes people along with that. And I think he acted at the global stage, you know, and if that's your capability and if that's your calling, fantastic, go for it. And then there's Kees Kruithof, who used to sit in the executive of Unilever and didn't make the CEO job and then decided that he was going to do something for the climate. He started a company together with a few others in meat replacement foods, and he is totally dedicated to, as much as he can in his sphere of influence, to build the largest meat replacement firm in the world, right? And that's his place to act on. And he believes in that and he's passionate about it, and that sort of matches his capability. And then there's Merle, the local community center in Springville, who works with 30 Somalians who recently moved back into Melbourne, or immigrated into Melbourne. And she plays at that level, and she tries to help those people integrate into community. And that's the level that she wants to play, and that's leadership. And for me, those three bits of leadership are equally important. And so to Nadeem's point, you know, find a canvas on which you want to paint, and then paint, right? Be courageous and be curious, and go for it. And it doesn't matter whether you're Kees Kruithof from Martin Luther King or Merle. Whatever works for you, works for you. And so leadership is not in the position that you're in, it's in what you do with your life, and how you show up every moment for the people around you. That's my 2 cents of wisdom that I have for you tonight.
Thank you, Jaap. Actually, you already started on the tips, but yeah, so we came to the part where you guys have some tips for the students that you'd like to share.
I've run out, I don't have any more.
You don't have any more tips.
I have to say that just to react to what you just said, yeah. I think what I really like is that there are different staff at different moments. Because we've talked about our leadership styles, but just imagine that there are different situations and that they require also different leaders. And that's something you also need to reckon, that there might be a certain stage where you are the right person for something, but there might be also someone else who might be the right person for something. And what I really liked about what you said as well is what we discuss also is to empower others. So don't look at it how you can, you know, be relevant for yourself, which is important, but take an outside-in look and take a look how you can be relevant for others. I think that's more and more important. So doing good for society, so not only doing good for yourself. I think your generation really grows up with doing good for society. Our generation, we didn't, to be honest. We looked when you were going out at your age, you started ABN AMRO, everybody wanted to work for ABN AMRO, Unilever, etc. And so I did something else by working for a small reinsurance brokerage firm. But also if you take a look at the case, and so does anybody know the Live Kindly Collective? Not yet. So Kees Kruithof, so he was on the board of Unilever, and now within 1.5 years, he started 18 months ago, he's raised over $500 million for his new company. Over $500 million for plant-based and meat replacement. And try to look him up in LinkedIn and, you know, make sure you follow him, because it's really inspirational, you know, how he takes the troops along. He uses all of it, he surrounds them with very clever people. I think I like that one as well. You know, don't be the most smartest in the room, then you're in the wrong room. I think that's
I like that, yeah.
Yeah. So,
I think I have 2 things, and I mean, you mentioned that authenticity is key, right? People know when you're faking it. Be confident about who you are and find the organization and the environment in which you will thrive in being that person. Don't try and act like somebody else. And the other one is, there have been a lot of reports about students' mental health during the COVID crisis, and that you guys have had a tough time. Life is always going to try and knock you down, right? So get out of the tough times what you can. There's always a learning to take with you, that you can take with you to make a success moving forward. I learned that the hard way. I hope you guys don't have to learn it too much the hard way, but you know, if you think your career is going to be stellar and it's going to go like that the whole time, it's not, right? You're going to stagnate, you're going to take steps back, and just take the learnings with it. Take a moment to feel like crap and then move on. I think those are the key ones.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if you've seen Benjamin Zender. He's a director. I think he's the Boston Philharmonic. I'm not entirely sure, but he also has a few TED Talks. He talks about rule number 6. You heard about rule number 6? You don't know what rule number 6 is? No, he's sitting in a room and he's talking to someone, and the person comes in and they're all flustered, right? And they're like, oh, well, you know, you need to do this. And he says, looks at him and he says, take it easy, think about rule number 6. Oh, yes, rule number 6, thank you very much. And the person walks out of the room and the conversation keeps going, and another knock on the door, someone else comes in frantically, you know, and I can't believe this, and it's a very serious situation, we need to do something about that. Do you remember rule number 6? Oh yeah, thank you, rule number 6. So Benjamin becomes quite, curious by now, and he says, so sorry to ask, we're having a nice conversation, but I'm really curious about rule number 6. What's rule number 6? And I say, rule number 6 is don't take yourself in a situation so seriously. And the guy says, okay, so don't take it so seriously, don't take yourself so seriously, all right. And so, more life's sort of a game more than anything to achieve. But if that's rule number 6, what are the other rules? There are no other rules. And so for me, that's it, every time I get stuck or I start thinking about getting stressed or whatever, it's always got to do with the fact that I take myself way too seriously. Somebody is making fun of me, or, I don't get hurt, or I can't break through in the things I want to break through in, or my kids tell me that I'm a terrible dad, or whatever, whatever it is, I'm always taking myself way too seriously. And when I can take a step back from that, then I think there's room for curiosity and courage, and also for the other person. It's not about me anymore. And I think that's the key lesson about leadership, it's not about you.
Yeah, maybe one last word. I think it's to believe in yourself, because if you don't believe in yourself, no one else will.
Yes.
So it starts with self-love and self-care. You need to really make sure you love yourself. Sometimes you're all reflecting like the outside world is about you first, make sure you're okay, and mental health was something you just referred to. And then also realize that the only thing which will keep you from realizing your dreams for tomorrow is your doubts of today. So you are the one who's actually, if you're not taking the steps to get away with your doubts, no one else will. They are actually taking them with you. So you have to pursue your dreams and relentlessly pursue them. And so make sure that all the doubts that you have, that you take them out yourself. You can. You have the power to do so. And if you don't feel like you don't have the power to do so yourself, then surround you indeed with not only the smartest, but also with the nice people who are willing to help you when you need their help. And that's why I said also, that's when you stepped in, I said it's important to make the choice for the right, university, the right school, the right, etc., but the right friends and for me, the right partner. And I mention it specifically because without my husband, I would not have been able to do the things I've done. He really empowered me to do it. Empowered me also when I was really feeling down and experienced, he talked about what happened. I've not been they don't all love me at Aon. I've been there now for 32 years. But, there are people who really are jealous. That's all. That's going to happen to you guys as well. There will be people who you like, and there will be people also who will not like people. And so it's about, about at the end of the day, it's about, I've always said I want to do something. I have a mission also on diversity and inclusion. We didn't discuss that. That's for me not a job. That's really my mission to empower people. But follow your passion. And don't do everything for money, because it's important to have money. But at the end of the day, money doesn't, you can buy a lot, but you can't buy real happiness. You can't buy with money. That's in yourself. That's your own.
Thank you. And also beautiful closing words. We're going to
Questions.
the questions. So you have anything else do you want to ask something? Yes, maybe state your name and then say your question.
My name is Marin. I've got a question. What is something we can change or do now to get to our dreams of tomorrow?
I would say be clear about what your dreams are and recognize what you need in order to achieve that, and then set a plan, right? It's like any complex problem, break it down. But if you don't know where you want to go, then you're never going to get there. Not sure if that's what you're looking for.
Yeah, clear answer.
Yeah, and I agree, as far as the jobs that you're looking at this point in time. I've done a lot of interviews with people just coming out of university. People would come in and they say, I'm passionate about cybersecurity. It's like, okay, so where do you see cybersecurity threats at this point in time and in the future? No answer, right? How passionate are you, right? And then you look at the kind of jobs that they've had, and there's nothing showing that they're willing to go above and beyond to stand out in that area. So for your internships or whatever, be picky.
Yeah, I agree. I have to say, Nadeem, I really feel like he's a secret agent, so my name is Nadeem, not James Bond. No, I think really, honestly, it's really important that I've really learned to follow my passion, and so, but also to be articulate about it, and also to be articulate about what I can and cannot achieve myself. So there's some things I can do on my own, but there are a lot of things I cannot do on my own, and that's get help. But I've always said you're the master of your own universe. When people talk about CEO, you're the CEO of your own life. So you guys are all studying business, etc. You want to talk CEO and the garages, etc. You're mastering your own universe. You're the CEO of your own life. That's what this is about. It's not only about a study. This is truly your life. in the life of the people you care with. And so setting a dream or setting a point at the horizon, even if it's not the right point at the moment, you know, I'm always saying we're sitting on a big ocean, and unfortunately with climate change it's all the same oceans and there's lots of storm. So we're sitting in different boats. But you know, if you want to go somewhere else, I want to go to a tropical island. And so this is the fun joke in my family. My husband always likes to go skiing, and I'm not particularly so fond of cold weather, so I want to go to a tropical island. The funny part is, you know, it's always something you need to do, and it's something you do together, or some parts you do on your own. But it's your life, and you need to make sure it's the one you want to be.
Favorite?
Huh?
Favorite? You can go sit on the beach or go skiing
Oh,
the same
really?
day.
Another tip.
Yeah.
That's not bad, yeah.
That's where I learned skiing, actually,
Yeah.
when I was 4. I might have just to add that, you know, get to know yourself, right? So not only ask what are my dreams, but also why are they my dreams? Of all the dreams I could have, why this one? So go to the next level down, because otherwise it all stays in terms of external things you want to achieve. Right? Once I get that big house, I'll be happy. Once I get my experience is you get there and you're like, okay, now what? And so, you know, what makes you tick, what makes you joyful, and find a bit of joy every day in your life, and that learning is part of that. So, so the second one would be, you know, find people that you really admire for what you admire them for, and so, and then see if you can get close to them and see what you can learn from them. So if you find someone inspirational, find out why you find them inspirational, and what if you find someone results oriented and you really like that, then have a talk with the person about that particular thing. So don't look for mentors who can give you everything, but find people who excel at something, and then I think get just really curious about what is it that makes them excel at this and makes them tick. And so those would be my, get to know yourself and seek out bits of others that they do really, really well and learn from that.
Yeah, and maybe to add how to do that, because otherwise you ask, how do you do that? So if you started, this is what I learned, this is not something I think of myself, this is what I learned at Harvard Business School. If you started a discussion with somebody on a topic, or you want to learn who you do, you ask the question why. And when he's given an answer, you ask him again why. So for 5 times you ask why, and that actually might lead you to the root cause of who that person is. So simply asking 5 times why. The other one I'm looking at what? But it's really trying to get deeper than it, yeah. I had to learn that too. I didn't know how to do it until it was told to me. Because it's like you're trying, can I ask a question? So if you ask why, it's always...
So also to yourself.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, does anyone else have a question? Oh, Nadeem, you go first.
Me?
Yes.
Okay. I actually have 2 questions that are kind of unrelated.
What's your name?
Sorry?
Your name?
Oh yeah, Samuel, sorry. The first one would be to everyone, and I guess if you had a regret that you had that you have now, so you've obviously accomplished a lot. And the second question would be specifically, I don't know if it's possible, on the insurance market. And I would like to understand, like, if you could speak about how climate change is really impacting your work, and especially the insurance industry. I would be interested if you could speak about that, especially on the light of what happened, for example, recently in Germany with the floodings. Yep, so that's my 2 questions.
So the first question is if they have any regrets.
Yep.
And the second question is directly linked to
I mean, obviously you have regrets, but the question is, would you be in the same place if you changed anything, right? I think for myself, I wish I had recognized that there is strength in authenticity. For a long time, I was very concerned about, were my opinions valid enough to voice them, and how would that work, right? As I mentioned, Middle Eastern culture is very hierarchical, so I struggled in a Dutch society that isn't, where your manager is expecting you to speak up, and it was very contradictory to me. I think that's the one thing I would have liked to have learned earlier, rather than a regret that I have.
Yeah, so I'll take that. So the regret, funny because I always say, like, if somebody once asked me, like, if you would write a letter to your younger self, what would be your advice? And I said, I wouldn't give anything away, because actually all the things I learned, resilience is 7 times falling down, 8 times standing up, as a Japanese proverb, and that's how I learned it as well. I would not be sitting here if I would have done everything okay, because then I would have learned anything, and I might have stopped my learning curve. So I think I definitely have regrets. I think the most is back to authenticity, is you're not being honest to yourself, and you know you need to be honest to yourself. There will be times in your life also when you feel like you should do something, you should change something or whatever, and there have been times where I wasn't truly honest to myself. And those are the times where I say, maybe, okay, but that's a learning curve as well. So I always take it in the positive end. And the one thing which I think is also, I'm not sure whether it's a regret. I think it's important that you realize that you only have one life to live, so you need to make really the best out of it. So use your time, good for yourself, but also for others. So I've started doing a lot of things next to EON, which are not good for myself, but good for others, because I really felt that that's where I brought the most value. And I actually feel that that's where I really am more influential than, so my work at EON is nice, good, but all the other things I do for other people are giving me much more satisfaction. And the regret sometimes is that maybe, why shouldn't I, maybe I sometimes have to regret, which is sitting next to him, very dangerous to say now because he's an executive searcher, but sometimes I feel like, why did I stay for 32 years with one company? Should I maybe changed also to take an outside-in look to something else? I'm not sure, so I don't even know whether it's regret, it's something which triggers my mind from time to time. But I think if you feel that things, be honest to yourself. If you're not honest to yourself, and I've had some situations where I felt I should have done this different and I wasn't honest to myself, I do regret those, yes. But also that's part of, sometimes things are going okay, some things will go.
Yeah, in terms of leadership, I can't think of anything other than what you said. So my example of the army, did I regret doing that? Yeah, of course, because I think I've known 34 boys of having a better time. At the same time, probably I helped a whole lot of people after that, by not being cynical. And I've learned that lesson much later. Maybe we've had a bad influence on a lot of others. So I agree with you, that's not regret. What I do regret in life is there were a few times I think that friends of mine were in real trouble and I didn't notice it. I don't think I was there for them. So that's probably the regret that I do feel, that I wish I could do differently.
It was about insurance and
Actually, as for your second question, is it okay if we story right now?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, in the end, because I think it's a very complicated
climate change.
Exactly.
But one thing what Jaap saying, and I think really important that you, I put the radar on, I told you the 360 radar, use your radar. And especially all of you in your environment, also for different, you guys, the past 2 years, you've been not as, exposed to each other as we've been. So some of you are really lonely, the voice they hear every day is their own voice because some of them don't go out their own rooms or where they live or whatever. So be aware of the fact, try to take a look, try to take it outside in perspective to other people. And as you said, like being judged and bullied, be nice to each other. And I really mean this, I think that this is something which is going on in the students' life at the moment. I think that the students' life at the moment, I don't think I'm not saying you, but I think that my students' life, my kids are leading, is not inclusive. And I really mean what I'm going to say now, it's not inclusive. You guys have an international world, an international environment, all kinds of different generations, different cultures, you name it. And it's important that, especially at this point in time, you need to be inclusive. In your world, you guys are being educated in an inclusive world. You need to be inclusive. If you're not inclusive, you actually already have limited your own opportunities for the rest of your life. I really mean it. And this is for me the most important one because I've been a member of the student association here. And if I hear some stories now, I'm getting like, what? I came in from Eindhoven. I told them I came in from Eindhoven. I didn't come from Wassenaar or whatever, I didn't come from the posh cities of the Netherlands. I came, and I really feel like, we met so many different people. That's what you're doing here as well with honors. You meet so many different people, different cultures, be curious. That's, I think, what we all said, be curious, because that's the biggest, that's really richness. That's really, rijkdom in English? Yeah. Well, intellectual.
Right.
Two other questions.
Yeah.
You go ahead.
What I really found interesting, Nadeem, what you said about knowing who you are and like if you fall down and then learn from it and move on. But I was interested in how did you move on? Like, what did you do, like in your head, or what activities did you do to like go back on track again?
Yeah. How did I move on? So the thing is, there's been a lot about knowing where you want to go. I didn't and don't always know where I want to go. So the question is, when I fall down, why have I fallen down, and what can I get out of it? And honestly, I mentioned I do martial arts. Generally, I go and my training partner is a 2-meter tall ex-Marine. We have a couple of good hours, and then I've gotten rid of all of the frustration and the anger, and then that's how I clear my head. And once I've cleared my head, I can put it behind me and say, okay, now that I've done that, what are the steps you need to do, right? Idle mind, idle hands. Just keep going, do something. Because if you stay there feeling sorry for yourself, you're a pathetic individual when you look in the mirror, right? I mean, nobody likes that vision. Don't be that person. And it may take a day, it may take a week, but at least you're moving forward. And that's what I've done, right? And it's about stepping out of the emotional part that, you know, when you get knocked down and analyzing it. Okay, what have I learned? Focusing on the good things, right? And taking those with you in your next steps in life. Does that help?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think. Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks.
And cry. Should I?
Right.
Yeah, show your emotions.
Yeah.
This is also something, when I still remember when I started working and I was angry, or I could tell this, Jaap knows my husband though, so you don't know, but the point is funny, in the beginning when I had a relationship and we had a fight, you know, I was really getting angry, and then I shouted or I cried, and he's been in the military, so I'm also on the military board of the military museum, so I understand the military quite well, so that's why it's funny to tell the story. And he just couldn't handle the emotions. And he'd been raised in a family with men, and he was in the military, and I'm very passionate, and if I get angry, I want to just say it, and I smash the door, and he says, if you smash the door, you're emotional, I can't talk to you. What? And the interesting part about this story is that this is what happens also in your life, in business or whatever. You have to learn, okay, if I act, what's the reaction of the other person? And I very much liked, this is what I call inlevingsvermogen, so it's empathy. But it's also Louis van Gaal, who is the coach of our Dutch national football team. He was being interviewed a couple of weeks ago, and has been the coach of Manchester United. I've also met him, and the guy he can be a bully. And if he doesn't like you, he can be really tough. And he's matured, because he was in an interview saying and now he's the bondscoach again, national coach of the Dutch team. He said, yeah, with every player, when I started this job, the guy's 70 years old, for everyone's in the room, a really old guy for being the national coach of the team. He said, I had conversations with each and every individual player to understand this is only he, what's keeping him, what's motivating him, what's inspiring him. And each and every individual is different. And in order to create a team, you need to know exactly how the different individuals relate. And something which if I act, if I shout, hey, come on, then you might start running. But if I would do that to you, you might say, no, it doesn't have the right reaction to me. So as a leader also, you need to know how the people in your team differently act and react and work with that. And I really have to say, I was so inspired by how he was telling this, because he was always really a harsh guy. So why I'm saying this, because it's relevant to learn that there's always something to learn. So, and back to emotions, be aware that some things might trigger a certain reaction with someone else which you didn't know. So it's about human behaviors, and to study them. I think be curious about how other people act to your reactions.
So to add just quickly to that point, studies have shown that when they've looked at leaders, and all of you have the minimum IQ in order to be a leader, the differentiating factor between the majority of people that are considered leaders is EQ. So, access your emotions and recognize them and let them play the part that they should play. Don't hide them away.
I think we have time for one more question.
I have two, but one is really small. It's for Margaret. The high school it's a trivial one. The high school that you went to, was it Augustiniano? I went there as well. So. And the other question, you said about that your character needs to lead in a situation of that we can say authentic leadership,
Yeah.
but in situations sometimes a different style is asked. Sometimes you need to be more strict, and sometimes you need the group to be more creative and on their own. Does that conflict? Do you think that conflicts, or how do you deal with that?
No, so back to what Nadeem was just saying about EQ. So I think what's important is EQ, IQ, that's what you need to have, but also AQ. AQ is the fact that you're able to adapt to the situation. And I love this quote from Jack Welch, which says that if the rate of change outside your firm, or outside your organization, outside your environment is faster than the rate of change within, the end is near. And so then it's only a matter of time when the end is near. And so back to adaptability. It's really important that if you're a leader, and there might be different leadership styles, but also there are also different leaders. If you take a look at graphs from Harvard Business School, really interesting that certain leaders, certain areas need different leaders. They even actually analyze what's the best time to step in for a certain company when you want to become a CEO. Because if you had a very bad CEO before you, you might have a new CEO, then maybe not the right time, then after that. But so things like that. I think, but back to adapting to the situation, it's important but authenticity for me stands out. I'm always myself. So if I'm coming here tonight and then we were taking a look, what do I said to them, we discussed like what we need to prepare.
Yeah.
And so I came from New York. I came home this morning, so I just went home to change and came here. And so then I said to my secretary, "What's the night up?" I had no clue. I knew I had to be here. And so I said, "What do I need to do exactly?" So she said, "Oh, okay, that's fine." And because I'm telling myself, so I'm myself with the driver, I'm myself with my husband, I'm myself with my kids. I can honestly tell you guys that from some I can take more than others. So if my kids criticize me, of course that's really horrible. If you're like, wow, taken in. Somebody else criticizes me, of course take it. But if your own skin, if they are telling you some things like, it's always like, okay. But I do very much listen to them, and I know that, okay, they've made a point. And the one interview to summarize at the end is I was interviewed with my daughter for a television show, and then I told the story, it wasn't recorded on television, but if I come home from my Aeon mood, which is American, Anglo-American modus, Cheryl Mondeville, you discussed it at the beginning as well, and I come home and then my kids and my husband just looking like, okay, Mom, command your dog and bark yourself, So back to take your business seriously, but don't take yourself too seriously, is what Jaap was saying. So, and I've learned how to do that, and and sometimes I do things okay, and sometimes I could do things better, but that's life.
Do you want to answer all your experience in different leadership styles?
Well, I think you've answered it really beautifully, because I don't think that the applying of different styles needs to imply that you're not yourself. And so I think that was behind your question, right? Do you get into trouble with yourself if you have to act in a certain way that you feel is not congruent with who you are? And so, I think that there's ways in which you don't need to get to that point. So if you're clear on what differences you want to make, and that's important enough to you, then you can find different ways to do that. That's still authentic, because your intent and the reason why you're doing it is to make the difference you want to make. Now you can make the wrong choice, that's okay, but at least if you intentfully act in a certain way because the outcome that you want is the impact that you have in mind, someone to grow, someone to see something that is seen before, someone to feel good about themselves, the organization to move faster, whatever it is that you have in mind at that stage. I think it's not Machiavellian, like right there, the aim justifies the means, but I think you can be totally authentic with yourself and act in different ways. So, we're all actors, so you can put on a different mask and still be yourself.
I assume you yourself, when you're with your parents and with your friends, with your girlfriend if you have one, but it's not the same person. But it's still you.
So can I answer the question on climate change? Just a short 1 minute. I will keep it very short. So our generation. So it's only 20. We talk a lot about 2030, which is talk about net zero and 2050. And I want to. Our generation is we're able to save the planet. Somebody said 2 weeks ago at the conference. This generation, my generation, the leaders, we can be the generation who goes in the history books for the generation who saved the planet. And it's really tough, because it's like a prisoner's dilemma. You all have economics, I would imagine. You know what the prisoner's dilemma is. Who's first? Who's going to do the first step? And so it's also your generation, for whatever, on what level, insurance, global, whatever. So who was accountable for that? Because I noticed that we're all being looking like, oh, it's going to cost money. It's going to cost a hell of a lot of money to make things, to make change, to have the energy transition work, etc. And it takes guts and courage to get that going. But I really invite you all to keep our generation. That's why I had a role model, Emma Watson. Because your generation should, you should work for the companies you believe in. Choose the companies you feel represent the values you want to see back in society. You have a choice to make, which you can live by, not going and fight what's happening at the moment at the Pool Signal, etc. But to have your voice heard, to have your vote heard. Yeah, but that's really important. And to choose the things you want to eat, to choose the things you want to live, to choose, etc., etc. And take also the people who have not the intellectual capability to comprehend what's going on, and there's a lot of people who are not able at the moment to comprehend what's going on. Try to take them along. If you want to talk about leadership today, if you can do that, and hold people and hold them account, ask questions. By asking a lot of questions, you can raise a lot of eyebrows, and then hopefully people start thinking behind the eyebrows.
Great way to end.
Great. Yeah.
Too soon.
I don't think we have time for any more questions, but if anyone has a question, would you be open to?
Oh yeah, reach out.
And how can they reach out?
You can link LinkedIn.
LinkedIn, grab us as we're walking down the hall, whatever.
Is this where we clap?
Well, I would just like to, first of all, obviously thank you as speakers. You've been very open and also vulnerable at times, which is very nice to see. And also very inspiring for us. At least I'm feeling inspired. I think everyone here is feeling inspired, and everyone that can watch the footage back, can also get that feeling that we felt here today. So thank you very much for that. And I also want to thank you, of course, for coming and for asking all of the questions, for paying attention. Thank you very much. And also thanks to our video crew today for capturing this for us. So yeah, thank you all very much, and I hope to see you all at the next event.
Thank you.